It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to you Dr. Michelle McMurry-Heath. She is the President and CEO of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, best known as BIO, the world's largest biotechnology advocacy group. BIO represents nearly 1,000 life science companies and organizations from 30 countries. The organization's mission to support companies that discover and deploy scientific breakthroughs that improve human health, environmental stewardship, and sustainable. Since assuming the leadership of BIO on June 1st, 2020, Dr. McMurry-Heath has positioned BIO as a leading champion of scientific innovation and biorevolution, which aims to use the technology breakthroughs to cure patients, protect our environment, and nourish humanity. She calls the distribution of scientific progress the social justice issue of our age. Before coming to BIO, Dr. McMurry-Heath worked at Johnson & Johnson, where she served as global head of evidence generation for medical device companies, and then vice president for global external innovation and global leader for regulatory services. She led a global team of 900 people with responsibilities in 100 different countries around the globe. President Obama named her Associate Director, Science Director of the Food Drug Administration Center for Devices and Radiological Health. In that role, she championed clinical trial evolution, the use of real-world evidence in product evaluation, and an embrace of the patient's voice in health research so new medical products deliver outcomes that matter to them. Dr. Michelle was the founding director of the Aspen Institute Health Biomedical Science and Society Policy Program. She received her MD and PhD degrees from Duke's Medical Scientist Training Program, becoming the first African American to graduate from the prestigious program. She spent 12 years working at the research bench before taking policy and leadership roles in government and industry. Dr. Michelle lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, Sebastian, veterinarian, and their daughter, Isabella. She enjoys yoga, snorkeling, and I hope she can one day do it here in Costa Rica, and her daughter's sporting events. We are so happy to have you here with us today, and especially thank you since we know how early it is where you are now. Welcome, Dr. Michelle, to Biolíderes.
Gracias, Patricia. Thank you so much for your leadership. It is an honor to help open Biolíderes 2021. And of course, I am speaking to you virtually, but I've always wanted to visit Costa Rica. And actually, when I was a global team leader at J&J, I traveled quite a bit, but I have yet to visit your beautiful country. I was actually scheduled to arrive in Costa Rica in March of 2020. And I would have celebrated my 50th birthday there, but COVID had other plans, as it did for so many of us. So I look forward to traveling soon and seeing all of the important and inspiring advancements coming from your biotech sector. You know, the progress and excitement behind Costa Rican biotech is one reason why I was eager to speak with you today. As you know, Costa Rica is a regional biotech leader, from medical advancements to innovations that improve agriculture and the environment. You're making great strides that are gaining global attention, and your progress can't come soon enough. Our society is facing a number of challenges that biotech leaders can solve. COVID is the most immediate, and I'll talk about what progress against the virus means for our industry. But improving agriculture, making crops more resistant to climate change, and supporting environmental diversity are also critical. In fact, it's actually getting harder to distinguish between these issues. For if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that there is a profound connection between how we live our lives and our susceptibility to disease. And in reality, there is but one health. A strong biotech industry can provide solutions to many of our challenges. The combination of science and modern technology is breeding rapid progress with record-breaking developments of things like the COVID vaccine being the latest example. But as an industry, as policymakers, and as advocates for science, we've got to realize that innovation for innovation's sake is not enough. We must ensure that our advances have real-world benefits and that those benefits reach everyone. I like to call this just science, where the science being developed, the benefits it will bring, and the opportunities it creates can reach deeper into communities in ways that are fair, impactful, and just. But making sure that our science helps everyone, from the richest to the poorest, requires three things. First, a strong science education and public trust in science. If we want to sustain and grow our progress, we must prepare the next generation of scientists. And if we want the public to support science education and believe in the value of our advancements, then we must win and keep their trust. Second, we must ensure that there is broad public access to scientific innovations and cures. Right now the focus is on COVID, but there are many other advancements such as gene editing and genetically engineered crops that must benefit everyone in our society. And third, we've got to ensure that global access to innovations and the removal of any barriers to those innovations happens. In this respect, I take heart from the partnerships that formed during the pandemic, as well as from those who stepped forward to remind the world that a strong innovation ecosystem is a driver, not a hindrance, to advancing global access. So let's dig a little bit deeper into education and trust. As I mentioned, the biorevolution is changing lives. Scientists are editing genes in living organisms to prevent disease, increase environmental resilience, and to improve productivity, including right here in Costa Rica. But sustaining these advancements starts at an early age. Primary and secondary school must teach science and teach it well. Colleges and post-secondary institutions must offer high-quality courses and experiments in the lab and in the field. I'm confident that if scientists listening right now look back on their educations, they will remember one teacher or maybe one experiment that really changed their lives. Mm-hmm. It's why students' lack of access to the lab during pandemic really worries me. I've seen this in my own daughter's education. As our kids have stayed out of school, it's been more difficult for them to see the wonder of science. Costa Rica is known as a leader in Latin America when it comes to education spending, quality of research, and the number of graduates in scientific fields. And I encourage you to continue your focus on science education and to make sure that every student, no matter where they attend school, can become a scientist. Because even if they do not become the next Christian Marine, they will have the tools to succeed in life and to advocate for science. And as advocates, they can help our sector build trust with the public. COVID really exposed what we overlooked for too long, the weakness in people's trust in what we do. Each country and each community bring their own baggage to the story. In the United States, there has long been an anti-vaccine movement. And in many parts of the world, minorities, often rightfully, are distrustful of the motivations of leaders and institutions. And often, people are unaware of the incredible research and testing that makes our advancements safe and effective. I know acceptance of COVID vaccines is higher in Latin America than in places like the US, but let's remember that the biorevolution is tackling other pressing issues too, like climate change and crop failure. So we have no time to lose. Scientists, government leaders, and media must be prepared and willing to affirm the benefits of science for all. For a scientist, advocacy may be new or even a little bit uncomfortable, but as we advance the biorevolution, scientists must be responsible for how our work is understood. People implicitly trust what's familiar, even if it's not new. They know it and it feels safe. We can't always count on fear to endear people to our advancements, nor should we want to. Scientists must proactively explain how our drugs and treatments, how our seeds and how our products will safely improve people's lives. Strong education and advocacy will make people more receptive to change, but it takes investment and coordination across sectors. So your strong biotechnology sector, led by the cluster, can help drive this important work. A strong biotech creates economic development and good jobs, but it also inspires people of all ages and backgrounds to believe in the benefits and the progress of science. Second, our claims about the benefits of science will fall on deaf ears if they are not experienced firsthand. There's an English expression you may know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if people don't see new treatments helping them, or if they don't see genetically optimized crops increasing their food supply, why would they believe what science claims to offer? My conviction here comes from my experiences growing up and as a young physician. As a teenager in Oakland, California, I joined my mother on some of her public health visits to low-income women. She was a public health nursing director and spoke with women about ways to avoid HIV and to keep their babies healthy and many other health issues that plague them. Later in my career, I had a decision to make, whether to become a doctor or a researcher. It was a difficult choice, and I believed that as a researcher, I could make advancements that would improve lives at scale. Yet I felt a responsibility to my home community to become a physician and provide more immediate help to people who needed it, people who needed to see medical advancements improving their lives today. In the end, I split the difference and did an MD and PhD program. And that decision to serve the community while also pursuing what I believed to be my more selfish passion at the time helped me realize just how many families our society leaves behind, not just by healthcare, but by science. And I often think of the children I saw coming into our emergency room with conditions like asthma or diabetes. As a young physician, I could treat them in that moment, but I knew they needed broader, more deep-cutting solutions. Who was cleaning up the air that they breathed? How could we provide them with more nutritious foods to strengthen their immune systems? I often pondered these questions as they went beyond our hospital doors. And across Latin America and the world, we have major inequalities in health and other areas. Science must play a role in addressing them. That's why Bio launched the Bioequality Agenda, which has 3 main focus areas. 1, to promote health equity in access to medicines and ensure diversity in clinical trials. 2, to invest in minority scientists and entrepreneurs. And 3, to expand opportunities for women and minority groups through our industry's purchasing power and how we collaborate with our really diverse supply chains. Each of these components is critical to increasing access to healthcare, improving diversity in biotech, and ultimately attaining just science. We hope to serve as a model for other organizations and companies looking to improve these outcomes in their work, because one of the best ways to ensure that more people benefit from scientific progress is to ensure everyone is at the table when the decisions are made. Increasing access for all is key within nations and companies, but also between countries and regions. And this is where I want to talk about COVID. With the onset of the Delta variant, the situation remains critical in all corners of the world. And I understand in Costa Rica that you are administering doses of the COVID vaccine as quickly as you receive them, and that demand is strong. With about 17% of Costa Rica vaccinated and 38 cases per 100,000 people, we need to get more shots into people's arms. Simply put, that will slow the spread, sustain the healthcare system, strengthen the economy, and save lives. Regular vaccine shipments, including the arrival of 500,000 doses from the US, are important, but there's much more that we can do to increase production and improve distribution. Some have suggested waiving intellectual property rights as the way to do this. And unfortunately, that will only lead to more delays as the world waits months or years for new and complicated production facilities to be brought online. That's time that unfortunately we don't have. What's more, an IP waiver will undermine the strong IP protections and innovation ecosystem that produced vaccines to begin with, that got them to us in record time. Bio has proposed a better way to increase access, one which I recently discussed with the WTO and the WHO leaders as well. We call it our Global Share Program, and it outlines key areas where industry, governments, and NGOs should prioritize their efforts to vaccinate more people. First, industry must continue to work with governments that have a significant vaccine supply to share a meaningful proportion of their doses with other countries. This includes through COVAX and other established mechanisms, including bilateral agreements that we've seen in recent months. We're on track to produce 12 billion doses by year end. And in a system that normally produces 2 billion vaccines globally, 12 billion in a year is historic. But that 12 billion must be allocated to prevent the spread of the virus. Second, manufacturers are increasing vaccine production, including through new collaborations with production capable partners. As part of this effort, we are partnering with governments and individual suppliers of raw materials and components to safely scale production. Third, to support production growth, we must identify the barriers that are currently preventing the trade of materials, those raw ingredients needed to increase vaccine production. Many folks don't realize that the mRNA vaccines have over 200 components, and some of these components are running critically low at the global level. We at Bio appreciate the World Trade Organization for mobilizing its members in this regard. Fourth, industry is committed to partnering with governments, particularly in low-income countries around the globe, to ensure that they are able to deploy doses as soon as they are available. Doses only work if we can quickly get them into people's arms, making it imperative for all parties to work together to overcome delivery delays. And finally, to drive further innovation, we will continue to pursue new vaccines, including those aimed at novel variants. And the current spread of the Delta variant only heightens our industry's commitment. Taking all of these steps will slow the spread of COVID. It will also better prepare us for the next pandemic and improve day-to-day healthcare delivery. Additionally, new partnerships between scientists, policymakers, and civil society leaders will pay dividends in other key areas, such as environmental sustainability. If we continue to build partnerships, share doses, and prioritize delivery, we'll defeat COVID without undermining the innovation ecosystem that is supporting the growth of biotech companies, including right here in Costa Rica. So let me conclude by saying that Costa Rica has a tremendous opportunity to lead here. With a 50-year life sciences track record, you understand the job, investment, and opportunities that a strong biotech sector brings. Your focus on science education, investments, and partnerships are a real model for the region and frankly for the world. And your biodiversity, including being home to the IIEK, you're already a leader in agricultural and environmental research. There is an immense opportunity here to become a regional hub, to tap into global supply and value chains, and to uplift lives across Latin America. With your ability to attract foreign investment, a talented workforce, and the convening power of the biotech cluster, you have the power and the vision to continue to grow. It's a future that we at Bio look forward to supporting. And finally, with the world as it is in this humbling time for leaders, this is a time for us all to pull together. But there are two things that I want to leave you with, and they are these. One, support and build a strong biotech industry and innovation ecosystem. Biotech companies are economic drivers who will deliver novel solutions to existential problems like disease, climate change, and environmental instability. Show people that we can tackle big problems and restore their trust in science. 2, never forget that our success and sustainability, both as a sector and as a society, is based on popular support. Show people how our innovations will improve their lives by focusing on solutions that they need and ensure that they can access them. That is how you turn skeptics into believers. We are at an amazing moment for biotechnology and a defining one for the world. There is so much potential at our fingertips, and yet we've only scratched the surface. So much of our society and our sector have yet to be told. And leaders like you will play a vital role in writing the next chapter together. So thank you for everything you do. Thank you again for inviting me to speak. I look forward to your questions, and more importantly, I look forward to meeting you in person one day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle, for your insights. It's so great to have your biotech vision from all your perspectives, especially education and how we share the importance of teaching children from very, very young age. Everything that you mentioned regarding the COVID and what have been the updates on that, how important it is to work with together institutions and governments and academia, and all the different perspectives are how important it is to be able to share all this scientific knowledge with everyone and to be able, and I know that this is one of your biggest issues in terms of, and legacies of being able to have and share science with all. Thank you also for your kind words about Costa Rica and what all the opportunities that we have. And there are so many, and we want to also work together with you and your organizations and other people's a little bit about what we've already been doing, but so much more to do. At this time, I would like to invite the audience to send their questions to Dr. Michelle via the chat box that is on the platform that you are right now, and I will try to pass them along. I should be getting them here. And I will try to pass them along. In the meantime, as you know, the community of Costa Rican scientists related to the biotech businesses have so many questions, and I would like to start with one of them, a couple of them. On June 1st, 2020, you became BIO's third president since its founding in 1993, and the first woman to lead the world-recognized biotechnology organization in one of the most challenging and opportune moments for science. What has been your most difficult and most rewarding experience since you started?
Well, this has been such a difficult year for so many around the world. So I think some of our challenges may pale in comparison, but I will say integrating into a new organization that's diverse, not just in the group of great talented professionals that lead bio, but also in the 1,000-member companies and our international partnerships around the world that support and are an important part of the fabric of bio. Leading that group, not being able to actually meet that group has been a unique and interesting challenge. I would have hoped to have joined you in person, for example, for an event like this, to really get a chance to see and hear from your companies firsthand. But I know that we're all sharing that challenge together, and we will surmount it soon, and we'll have the opportunity to build our partnerships in a much more intimate way as we go forward. So patience just has to be the key there. But the opportunities have also been transformative in this time as well. You know, observing firsthand how our industry has responded to COVID in a way that is nothing short of breathtaking, just continues to inspire me, and to see not just the leading vaccine candidates, for example, but the fact that our industry started nearly 1,000 research and development programs around the globe to generate drugs, therapies, and vaccines to fight COVID was just phenomenal response to observe. And I just believe in our companies even more than I ever have. And it's such an honor and privilege to stand and tell their story.
Well, I personally congratulate you for taking that tremendous challenge and all the work that you're doing at that right now. On another side, regarding Latin America, what is BIO's strategy in supporting biotech development in this area or any other upcoming projects for the region? Also, how can we support in conveying the message on supporting bio and expanding its influence in Latin America?
Well, one of the key things that, once again, COVID has really highlighted is how we need to internationalize our not just research and development initiatives, but manufacturing initiatives around our biotech products. When we had a series of really informative conversations and debates with Dr. Ngozi, the leader of the World Trade Organization, it was clear that her charge to our companies is to figure out not just how to have breakthroughs in a handful of countries, but how to spread those breakthroughs around the globe and make sure that our products are manufactured with a real global footprint so that each region of the globe feels that they share in part of the biotech revolution that is coming and is here in many ways. So that is really important. At Bio, we see ourselves as really helping to spark and support many of these international partnerships. And we want to see much more of that in the next few years. It's an imperative that we do so. So that is really critical and key. But I also think Latin America has led the world in many important ways, including in our conversations about climate sustainability and biodiversity. Costa Rica in particular has really been shining a light in this area for some time. And it's time, past time, for the rest of the world to heed your calls and your cautions and to learn from you about how important this is. And this is an area where biotech can provide key tools and approaches. So there are a lot of interesting opportunities and challenges right on our doorstep and much important work to do in the years to come.
Great. So I put on the table the possibility of Bio being able to do some sort of event when it's a little bit more feasible under the COVID circumstances, to do something here in Costa Rica and keep us in mind as some sort of event. Could be very specific to either agriculture or medical or something with one of the areas that we're working here, and that Bio can also do it as a venue here in Costa Rica. So I leave that on your thoughts.
Wonderful.
Okay. Our next question.
I'm going to hold you to it. I'm going to hold you to it, Patricia.
Great, great. So our next question is from Dr. Christine Marine, and as you know, he has been working on developing RNAi-based therapeutics for pancreatic cancer treatment. He has been also a reference for COVID-19 topics here in Costa Rica during the pandemic and is a founding member of Costa Rica Biomed. So welcome, Christian.
Hi, it's a real pleasure. Hi, Dr. Michelle. Thank you so much for your inspiring words. Really motivating to hear you. So my question is, in your view, what are some of the key ways that the pandemic has changed the biotech industry landscape? And what role do you see bio playing in navigating these new directions going forward?
Thank you, Christian. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can everyone hear me still? Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. It has changed our industry in so many important ways. I think, first of all, it made it clearer than it had ever been before how important collaborations are. The introduction mentioned how you've become a resource of knowledge for so many other researchers around the globe. And that type of sharing that, science has always done to some degree has just been accelerated and supported during the pandemic. And I think we'll continue to see that high level of partnership and integration that we've witnessed today, because we've seen the fruits of what happens when we share that freely. You know, at Bio, when the pandemic started, we brought together what we called the COVID hub, which was, we called it a Craigslist, where companies could log on and say, well, I have this manufacturing capacity, or I have this PPE, or I have this research, and I'm willing to share. And it was a place that brought companies together to be able to share their resources and talents. That's the type of integration and communication and partnerships that we must continue going forward so that we can maintain the speed that we've seen during this pandemic. The other thing I think that has changed in our industry is anyone outside of our industry, or even within our industry, that doubted the pivotal nature of the work that we do from day to day has had to change their mind. They've had to see that biotech really holds the answer when nothing else does. And that is inspiring. And I just see an increase in pride and respect for the work that we do. We still face challenges, we still face doubters, we still face folks that have questions about the speed of our science or the accessibility of our innovations. But I think there's also a deep respect for what's been accomplished, and knowing that it can be applied to so many other fields, like the field that you were in as well.
We have another question that has a little bit more to do with financing and how governments and financial institutions and academia can work together. So can you share your thoughts about the role of public and private co-investment in R&D plus innovation in biotechnology as an instrument to grow the critical mass of startups and increase the probability of startups becoming successful companies?
No, it's a very hot and important topic right now. There are a lot of conversations about whether or not co-investment, public co-investment, means that intellectual property should then be a public good. And while I think it's very, very important for public-private partnerships to continue to play a key role in biotech advancement, and I believe that because, not just because it's critical for us to have a close relationship between what our biotech companies and sectors are pursuing and what our public values. And that's what public-private partnerships help us make sure we knit very closely together. But it's important at the same time to realize that even when we have public investment in science, bringing innovations to the market usually occurs with a majority of private funding. Our enterprise in science is so complex and expensive and so rarely successful. You know, usually in biotech, 1 out of 10 succeeds. That you need both that public sector investment to make sure that we're pursuing the goals that are important to the broadest number of people, but you need that private sector investment at the same time to have enough capital and resources to get those winning ideas across the finish line. So we should have both, we need both, but we must remember at the end of the day that intellectual property is an incredible driver, an incredible engine of progress. And when private sector investment greatly outnumbers that of any public investment, no matter what country you're looking at in the world, we need to understand that we have to respect the drivers of that private investment as well as what the public contributes.
Yeah, and especially also because most of these projects are so long. They take, I mean, we're not talking about months, it's years, and it is so difficult to have sometimes investors everybody wants to see results very quickly. So another thing on that, it could be that you could divide the projects in smaller sections so that people can feel that they have achieved, you know, certain points in that respect. If we have ready, go ahead.
I was going to say, I really like that idea, Patricia. I think that makes a lot of sense. And there are certain stages of research that are more amenable to public financing and public interest. And there are certain areas and stages where it really makes sense for the private sector to take the lead. So that might be a very good way to integrate the two.
Right. So I'm going to ask if we have Mr. Jorge Sequeira ready. So we'll go to our next question that we have is from Jose Martinez, Jose Antonio Martinez. And Jose Antonio Martinez he's a brand leader of Pfizer, overlooking hospital therapeutics and intensive products for world emerging markets, including Latin America. So we have him live. Welcome, Jose Antonio.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for today's words, very enlightening. Our question comes from Costa Rica. Costa Rica has set a bold vision to create a life-centered hub, one that is sustainable and creates an ecosystem that nurtures innovation. Government, startups, academia, financing elements, and corporations to drive thought leadership across healthcare, agricultural, environmental, and leveraging the biodiversity that we have here. Can you share with us your learning on how these ecosystems have evolved in places like the US or Europe? And what would you advise to us as we embark on this journey to develop the life sciences hub here in Costa Rica?
Mm-hmm. Now, this is such an exciting news because I think it's incredibly important for us to see more of these hubs bringing together diverse scientists to the table. It's incredibly important as we move forward in that effort that I mentioned a little bit earlier of internationalizing much more than we have today, our scientific and biotech enterprise. So it's important to do. We at Bio have been putting together in the US context what we call a kind of roadmap for biotech hubs, so that state to state, we can look at the models that have worked and the models that have been less successful. I think the successful models have a couple of things in common. First, they often will target an unmet need, either a manufacturing need or research need, where they think they have a unique opportunity to get some early wins and to take a leading role early in their evolution. I think that is often helpful, at least as a place to start. Two, they tie to the education systems so that they're sure they are producing the workforce at the same time they are producing the companies, so that the companies have the human capital to reach their goals. This can be incredibly important. So for example, some of our hubs that have focused more on high-tech manufacturing have partnered with local colleges to make sure that they're training the workforce to fuel those manufacturing plants as they come along. And then third, I would say that the tax structure has to be as amenable as possible. Tax incentives really drive a lot of private investment in these hubs, and you want to be able to attract and recruit that private support as well as the public underpinning of it to make sure it is sustainable going forward. But there are many different examples of successful hubs, and I'm excited to see how the one in Costa Rica unfolds, because it's very important for us to do, and we need many more of them in Latin America.
Thank you.
Would you like to add something else to that?
No.
Okay, so now we have a question from the audience, and it says, Costa Rica is provided with bioreactors to scale up recombinant proteins, which is probably a unique facility to manufacture proteins. How do we attract at least one initiative to these facilities?
Well, there are many different types of COVID vaccines right now, but I would say that the ones that do rely on recombinant protein could really use that type of capacity. So I would say, let's get together and have a conversation, and we can help make sure that we are shining a very bright global spotlight on that capacity, because it is incredibly important and unique.
So we have now another question, this one from Jorge Sequeira. Jorge Sequeira is our Managing Director of CINDE. CINDE is the Costa Rican Investment Promotion Agency. Welcome, Jorge.
Hello, Dr. Michelle. As you are aware, Costa Rica is in the process of developing a biomaterials hub in order to take advantage of our rich biodiversity. The development of advanced biomaterials has led to incredible achievements in regenerative and personalized medicine. What can the industry, scientists, and physicians do to bridge the gap in order to adopt bench-to-bedside concepts, considering the regulatory restrictions? Thank you.
Well, regulatory hurdles are always huge, and I think there's got to be both a short-term and a long-term plan. On the long-term front, there is so much to be done in regenerative medicine in terms of harmonizing more our regulations globally. The more we can streamline and harmonize and get all of our regulators comfortable with this emerging technology, the better we will be. It's always difficult as a former US Food and Drug Administration regulator, I will say it's always difficult to introduce new and cutting edge technologies to the regulatory setting. They don't have a lot of familiarity with them necessarily. They want to be skeptical because that's their role in their job. But we have the opportunity and the responsibility to show them the promise and the opportunity. So I think having those early and often conversations with regulators are incredibly important. And I know that's easier to do in some parts of Latin America than in others. The other thing we really have to do is make sure that we are making it clear what the regulatory science approaches we are going to take are. That is, what are the tests, the settings, the real world evidence that we intend to collect to make our case that our breakthroughs do what we claim they will do and are as safe as we hope they are. That is incredibly important to co-develop along with the breakthroughs, so that when the breakthroughs are ready, the tests are as well. So there's a lot of opportunity there, a lot of excitement there. I can't wait to see what comes out of the work you're describing. And we just have to stay optimistic and diligent, and we will get there.
Difficult task, and it's a long one. A lot of different issues around regulation come along. We have been moving in the right direction, but I think there's still a lot to do with clinical trials and the regulatory portions regarding that. But a biomaterials hub or lab should be able to also enhance and make people work together, both from the government side and also from the private sector and academia on trying to work together to help regulatory issues move along. So we have one other question regarding education, and I know you mentioned this at the very beginning. I'm a big advocate of this part of education, and we need more scientists in the world. So for many centuries, science has been taught in the same traditional way, mostly theory in class and very little time in laboratories. Now in the future, we need, as I said, more students interested in discovering nature in all its form. And this can only happen if it's taught in a more challenging, fun, or Montessori way since very young, very young. I believe students should spend most of their time in labs rather than just theory in class. How do you feel about the way the science is being taught right now in earlier education? And what else can be done so we can have more students choosing careers in science fields?
Patricia, I could not agree with you more. Most of us who work in science don't think of science as boring, but I think if most of us look back or remember back to our earliest science classes, even those of us who came to love and appreciate science can remember some very, very discouraging or boring classes. And there's absolutely no reason for it. Science is hands-on. It must be hands-on. And there is so much of that type of education that can really bring excitement. I tore my 9-year-old daughter away from her iPad last night to do a science experiment kit that had come in the mail. And it was a very simple thing where you had hydrophobic sand, and there was a petri dish and all this brightly colored sand, and you put it in the dish and you do an eyedropper and put some water on it. And she's like, oh my God, the water beads up. That kind of excitement and discovery just delights children in a way that keeps their attention, pulls it away from video games and movies and the other things that are competing for their attention and their passions, and says, oh my God, what's possible? How do I understand what's appearing before my eyes? And how can I create some new experiments even out of what's been suggested? That type of engagement is critical, and it's not necessarily high cost or people intensive. It can be done in kit format. It can be done in competitions. It can be done in nature. We have to find ways to engage kids in what we know as research scientists to be the true life of science. And that's the wonder and awe of an experiment. So I couldn't agree. We have to do as much on this as we can because it's very, very, very important.
Yes, that's definitely a challenge, and something that has to be done together with, for example, the Ministry of Education here to see how we can interchange and work on those parts to really get children interested in becoming scientists. Regarding the for laboratories and how is this work in the United States, although most of it is or some of it is produced, we have sometimes difficulties in importing different types of for laboratory reactors or reactives, to do different labs and work. So how do you do it in the States that it becomes easier, or have you helped other countries in working so that they can have all the materials that are needed in laboratories to conduct mainly most difficult experiments?
Well, when you ask how we're doing it in the U.S., I will say not well, would be my quick answer. I think there is a lot of unevenness. Now, whether you're talking about reagents for scientific education, where we see shortages, and more importantly, even than the shortages, is the vast inequalities of how those reagents are distributed. The schools that are well-funded see a very, very different reality than the ones that are struggling. Or whether you're talking about reagents to run our companies and to power biotech research today, we are starting to see some pretty severe shortages, particularly in the cell and gene company space, due to the focus of materials and reagents on COVID vaccine manufacturing. So I mentioned in my remarks that we're on target to produce 12 billion doses of vaccines from a world that typically produces 2 billion doses of vaccines in a year. That has really put a stress and strain on scientific reagents. And so I expect for that to get worse before it gets better, although there are more eyes trained on how important this is to address.
We're almost running out of time, and I just wanted to see if you have any final thoughts in terms of the pandemic in general. And I know you've already talked a little bit about that, but what else can we do to prevent and also to get, for example, in the United States, more people to go get vaccinated in other places as well? They're still hesitant. I think the recent approval of the FDA has really helped and will continue helping, because that was one big issue that was stopping people from getting vaccinated. But what else, and for how long do you foresee a better situation? That would be our final question.
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball to know when we would emerge from this crisis. I think we all had hoped it would be by now. But the amazing thing is that the science continues to deliver and will continue to deliver. There is a lot to be done on hesitancy and on getting more doses in arms in the US and Latin America and many places around the globe. But there's some good news coming. We're expecting, for example, the clearance of the childhood vaccines, ages 5 to 12 is the next tranche that we're expecting, at least the US Food and Drug Administration to speak on, hopefully within the next few weeks. That could be huge. Getting all school-age children vaccinated will be an important next step. And then all of our major vaccine manufacturers are targeted towards producing vaccines for the variants. And that will be incredibly important as well. And then there's the whole question of boosters. You've seen the US and some other countries in recent weeks talk about the potential need for boosters going forward. And while there's a lot of controversy over whether or not we should be pursuing a booster strategy, while we are still struggling so hard to get the base population vaccinated, it is important for us to realize what the data shows, particularly for vulnerable individuals who've been vaccinated more than 8 months. It's time for us to at least consider how we protect them more carefully than we might have otherwise. So a lot of change coming on the COVID front, but hopefully it will be change for the better in the next 6 months or so. And I hope that we emerge from this. And this time next summer, we're having the conversation face to face.
Definitely, definitely. Opportunities for a bright future, and your words have been inspiring. It's great to hear you. Thank you again so much for joining us in this Biolíderes, and hopefully we'll be able to meet sometime when you come to Costa Rica or in Bio. And once again, I congratulate you for all your work you're doing. We as a cluster have also participated in Bio for several years, and we think it's a great place to make connections and really do a lot of work together. So thank you again, and thank you for joining us at a time that is very early for you. So have a nice.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Bye-bye.
Bye.